Next, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, is my turn to introduce Her Excellency Josefa Sacko, who is the African Union Commissioner in charge of Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Development. Welcome, my sister. You have been extremely instrumental in helping us co-host this summit.
Thank you, Cabinet Minister, to give me the floor. Good morning, every one of you. Let me acknowledge the presence of His Excellency, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, the President of the Republic of Kenya and coordinator of the Committee of Head of State and Government on Climate Change of African Union, His Excellency Azali Assoumani, the President of the Union of Comoros and current African Union Chairperson, His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, the Excellencies Head of States and Government from Africa and abroad, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, UN Secretary General, if he's present, His Excellency Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, honorable ministers present, executive head of international organizations, representative of the civil organization, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol duly observed. On behalf of the African Union Commission, I am pleased to welcome you all to the African Climate Summit and to thank all delegates from Africa and the world at large for setting time aside of your busy schedule to participate at this inaugural African Climate Summit. You are welcome. Karibu. Sejam bem-vindos. Vous êtes le bienvenu. Merci. Your participation is a clear demonstration of our unwavering commitment to collectively shape the future of climate change, climate action in Africa and across the world. We are not isolated. We are following the global agenda, although we are not the polluters. Our responsibility is just 4%, but we cannot isolate because the climate issue, it's really affecting all of us globally, the planet, and we need a sound planet for the next generation. That's why in the continent, we are fully committed in this agenda, and I really commend President Ruto for his commitment on this climate agenda. Congratulations, Excellency President. Let me also like to acknowledge the presence of former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, His Excellency Prime Minister of Ethiopia. You're welcome to this meeting. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to express our sincere gratitude to the government and people of Kenya for the warm reception and hospitality accorded to all the delegation since their arrival in this beautiful city of Nairobi. I would also like to commend the organizers from the different ministries and partners organizations under the leadership and strategic guidance of His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, that worked around the clock on the technical and logistical arrangement required for a successful summit. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I would like to submit to you that climate change is a pandemic in Africa and is responsible for more lives and economic distress. Climate change is resulting in an increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events that causes disasters with compounding effects because they do not allow us to recover before another disaster strikes again. What are we witnessing is the situation whereby governments are abandoning development and concentrating their resources in responding to climate-related disasters without building resilience. We know that many African governments, they are using at least 2% of their budget to invest on the disasters, on adaptation programs in the continent. In our continent. Research tells us that some of the African member states are spending up to 50% of their GDP per year in response to climate-induced disasters. The economic losses resulting from climate change stand at more than 5% of the annual GDP for the continent. The bottom line is that the cost of climate change in Africa is too high for us. We know for sure that crying for the promised resources by the developed countries' parties has not yielded tangible results, and even the $100 billion that you promised during the during the Paris Agreement, COP21, up to now, we haven't seen anything. We haven't seen anything. That was the pledge in 2009 to be accessible from 2022. We are in 2023. We haven't seen anything. Please, partners, come and honor your pledge. Has not been reached to Africa. This is despite being their obligation due to their historic responsibility for climate change in line with the Convention and the Paris Agreement. We also know that the cost of addressing climate change is also skyrocketing. For example, the revise of our NDCs for Africa will require an estimated $3 trillion of investment, US dollar investment, to implement, in addition to all the climate action, including NAPs. Africa has refused to wait and die due to climate change. We shall continue to pursue them to honor their obligation, but at the same time, we shall proceed with our own initiatives aimed at building resilience in Africa. I must confess that at the African Union Commission, we are enjoying support for some of our development partners, and so are some of the member states. However, Africa needs to move from a donor-recipient relationship to that built around investment, as that it is the pathway to reaping development aspiration of our continent, the Africa we all want. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the primary goal of this summit is to propel our collective efforts on climate change and sustainable development forward. The fundamental driver of success for African green transition will be the availability of resources for investment, and these must be accompanied by the strengthening of the ability of the African countries to mobilize their own resources, their own domestic resources. And I believe in Africa we can do it. We have the resources. Let us start allocating the resources on the environmental agenda when we are doing our national budget. I believe that we have this capacity. So the fundamental driver of this success, as I say, for African green transition will be the availability of resources for investment, and those must be accompanied by strengthening of the ability of the African country to mobilize our own resources, build on the foundation of solid and inclusive economic growth. As a continent, previous growth models have been predicated largely on the sheep production and export of African raw material with a minimal value addition. We have to start adding value and create jobs for our youth and our women. A continuation of this trajectory will undoubtedly reinforce Africa's vulnerability. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the African continent remains a key player in charting the way forward towards a low-carbon future, despite being the least contributor and yet highly vulnerable to the impact of climate change. However, our strength lies in our unity and the fact that we are a continent that is vibrant, fast-growing, useful, young population, energy, and diversity. Our solutions for African climate change are rooted in large-scale investment in climate resilience centered on energy access to drive sustainable industrialization. This represents one of the fastest drivers for poverty reduction, while also fundamentally changing the nature of Africa's economic model with large-scale investment in a sustainable value chain. To this end, we continue to put policy framework in place to support the implementation of climate action. Such frameworks include the African Union Climate Change and Resilience Development Strategy and Action Plan. This was adopted by our head of state. We are not here to invent the wheel. The wheel exists. If you want to partner with us, this is what our head of state adopted, and I invite partners to really align any investment in Africa with this important strategic action on climate change. We didn't have it, but we support of some partners, even the EU. We were able to elaborate and approve it. So I call upon all the partners and our member states to align on this, so that we are not trying to multiplicate or duplicate what already exists in the continent. The second strategy, it is the Continental Green Recovery Action Plan and the integrated strategy on meteorology. So these instruments are strategic and they exist. So if at all we want to tackle all the issues of the challenges of climate change, the tools are there. I'm just inviting investment. Let us find a mechanism where our member state can have access to these capitals, financing resources, so that we can go ahead. We have already done our homework with these tools that was approved. As I conclude, I would like to emphasize the following, that Africa's potential is fostering its sustainable development. Its great green transformation must be designed and led by African countries and African institutions, and should be centered on the mobilization of new and additional resources that can be deployed urgently. 2, that Africa's energy transition must be defined. My colleague is here. She's going to share with us how is she doing as a commissioner of this important department, which is the Department of Infrastructure. Honed and led by African for it to be just and equitable. 3, we need to structurally alter the relationship of African economy within the global economy and reduce the impact of exogenous shocks by building sustainable value chain. This will allow a focus on people and on ensuring the connection between the citizens of Africa and its immense natural health. In this process, we are determined not to be bystander in this, but to lead by doing. Nevertheless, as a continent, we will continue to hold our partners accountable to the promise they made to us. 4, together we aim to elevate the discourse surrounding climate change and realize support for a financial architecture specifically tailored by Africa, while also emphasizing our continent's abundant resources and the resilience as we accelerate our transition towards a climate resilient future. 5th, as this green transformation is built on this shared determination, I urge us to strongly embrace our collective strengths towards this cause. This summit will be just one step of many towards attaining our objective, which is our Agenda 2063. 6, and lastly, we will count on the support of partners present here today, as well all relevant stakeholders, to support the implementation of the summit's outcome. As the African Union Commission, we remain determined and committed to work with member states in addressing climate change, including the implementation of the outcome of this summit, which is the Nairobi Declaration. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention and look forward for a fruitful deliberation. Asante sana, muito obrigada, muitas gracias, merci beaucoup, shukran.